At Christmas dinner, my son's wife kicked me out saying, "Leave. We only invited you out of politeness." I just lowered my head and drove home. She had no idea who owned the building she lived in. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. I adjusted my tie one more time in the rearview mirror before stepping out of my car. The December air was crisp and Christmas lights twinkled from every window on Oak Street. Thomas and Jessica's apartment building looked particularly festive, with garland wrapped around the entrance columns. I'd been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. At 64, I didn't have many things to get excited about anymore, but seeing my grandson Billy, now 3 years old, always made the drive across town worth it. I'd brought his favorite chocolate chip cookies that I'd spent the morning baking, along with a small wooden train I'd carved myself in my workshop. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt longer than usual. My hands were slightly shaky, probably the cold, I told myself. When I knocked on apartment 4B, I could hear Billy's excited voice from inside. "Grandpa, Grandpa's here." The door opened, and there was my son Thomas, looking tired but managing a smile. "Hey, Dad, come on in." The apartment smelled like roasted turkey and pine from their Christmas tree. Billy came running toward me, his little arms outstretched. I knelt down and scooped him up, feeling that familiar warmth spread through my chest. "I missed you, buddy," I whispered into his ear. He giggled and pointed to the bag in my hand. "Cookies?" "Maybe," I said with a wink. That's when Jessica appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile looked forced, the kind you give someone when you're trying to be polite, but really wish they hadn't shown up. "George," she said flatly, "you're early." I glanced at my watch. "Actually, I'm right on time." "You said 5 o'clock," she sighed heavily, like I'd already done something wrong. "Well, dinner isn't ready yet. Billy, come here. Grandpa needs to wash his hands." The evening went downhill from there. Every attempt I made to connect with my family was met with subtle resistance from Jessica. When I offered to help in the kitchen, she told me I'd just get in the way. When I tried to read a story to Billy, she said it was too close to his bedtime and he needed to calm down. Thomas seemed caught in the middle, alternating between apologetic glances in my direction and quick nods of agreement with his wife. It was like watching my son disappear a little more each time I visited. During dinner, I made the mistake of asking about Billy's daycare. "He's learning so much," I said, cutting into my turkey. "Maybe I could pick him up one day this week and take him to the park." Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. "George, we've talked about this. Billy has a routine. We can't have people disrupting his schedule whenever they feel like it." I just thought, "That's the problem," she interrupted, her voice rising. "You think you can just show up and play grandfather whenever it's convenient for you, but parenting doesn't work that way." I felt heat creeping up my neck. "Jessica, I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to spend time with my grandson." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Spend time? Where were you when Thomas was growing up, working all the time, never around, and now you want to play the doting grandfather?" The words hit me like physical blows. Yes, I'd worked long hours when Thomas was young. I'd had to. After his mother left us when he was 8, I was all he had. Every extra hour, every weekend shift was for him, to keep our house, to pay for his school clothes, to make sure he never felt like he was lacking anything. "Jessica, that's not fair," Thomas finally spoke up, but his voice was weak. "Isn't it?" She turned to face him. "Your father never made an effort then, and now he thinks he can buy Billy's love with cookies and toys." I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. "I think maybe I should go." "Yes," Jessica said immediately. "I think that's best. To be honest, George, we only invited you out of politeness. It's Christmas and we felt obligated, but this isn't working." The room fell silent except for the soft Christmas music playing from their speaker. Billy, sensing the tension, had stopped eating and was looking between the adults with wide, confused eyes. "Mom," Thomas said quietly, but he didn't look at me. Jessica stood up from the table. "I'm tired of pretending everything is fine when it's not. Billy doesn't need this kind of disruption in his life. We're trying to build a stable family here, and having someone show up who doesn't understand boundaries isn't helping." I felt something crumble inside my chest. I'd faced a lot of hard moments in my life. Losing my wife to cancer when Thomas was 15, struggling through those early years as a single father, watching my son grow distant as he got older. But this felt different. This felt final. "I understand," I said quietly, standing up from the table. My legs felt unsteady. "I'll just get my coat." As I walked toward the door, I could hear Jessica telling Billy to stay in his seat and finish his dinner. No goodbye hug. No "see you later, Grandpa." Just the sound of my grandson being told to ignore my departure. Thomas followed me to the door. "Dad, I'm sorry. She's just stressed with the holidays and—" "It's okay, son," I said, though it wasn't. Nothing about this was okay. Maybe she's right. Maybe I don't understand how things work anymore. I wanted him to argue with me, to tell me that wasn't true. Instead, he just nodded and opened the door. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a pit. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat there for a long moment, staring up at their apartment window, watching the warm light spill out into the darkness. The drive home was a blur of Christmas lights and empty streets. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I just sat in the car, replaying Jessica's words over and over. "We only invited you out of politeness." 64 years old, and I'd just been told I was nothing more than an obligation, a burden to be endured out of social courtesy. As I walked up to my front door, I passed the mailbox and remembered the envelope that had arrived yesterday, the one I'd been meaning to open. Something about the property management company I'd hired years ago. Maybe dealing with boring paperwork would take my mind off the disaster this evening had become. What I was about to discover would change everything. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the letter I'd finally opened. The letterhead read, "Morrison Property Management," in elegant script, and the contents made my chest tighten with an irony so sharp it almost made me laugh. "Dear Mr. Henderson, regarding the Oakwood Gardens apartment complex at 1247 Oak Street, we're pleased to report that occupancy remains at 100%. The monthly rental income continues to exceed projections. The same building where Thomas and Jessica lived. The same apartment where I'd just been told I was unwelcome. The same place where my daughter-in-law had thrown me out like yesterday's garbage. I owned it. I'd owned it for 7 years. The memories came flooding back as I sat there in my quiet kitchen. It was 2017 when the opportunity had presented itself. Thomas had just gotten engaged to Jessica, and they were looking for their first place together. I remembered him calling me, frustrated after another disappointing apartment viewing. "Everything decent is either too expensive or in a terrible neighborhood, Dad. I don't know how people our age are supposed to afford anything." That same week, I'd gotten a call from my financial advisor about an investment opportunity. A small apartment building was going up for sale. Good location, solid construction, reliable rental income. The owner was retiring and wanted a quick, quiet sale. "It's a bit more than your usual investments, George, but the numbers look good. Steady tenants, low maintenance costs. Could be a nice addition to your portfolio." I'd driven by the building that evening. Oak Street. Tree-lined, safe neighborhood, close to good schools. The kind of place where I'd want my son to raise his family. The decision had been impulsive, which wasn't like me. I'd always been careful with money, methodical. But something about knowing Thomas was struggling to find a decent place to live made me act quickly. I put in an offer that night. When the sale went through, I'd instructed Morrison Property Management to handle everything anonymously. I didn't want Thomas to know. The last thing I wanted was for him or Jessica to think I was trying to control their lives, or that they owed me anything. I'd watched from a distance as they found the apartment listing, went through the application process, and celebrated when they were approved. Thomas had called me, excited. "Dad, we found a place. It's perfect. The landlord seems really reasonable, and the rent is actually manageable. We're going to sign the lease next week." I'd congratulated him, asking all the right questions, pretending I knew nothing about it. When they moved in, I'd helped them carry boxes up those same stairs, never letting on that I owned every step they climbed. Over the years, I'd made sure the building was well maintained. When the heating system needed updating, I'd approved the expense without question. When Mrs. Patterson in 2A had financial troubles and was late with rent for 3 months, I'd quietly told Morrison to work with her. When Thomas and Jessica had requested permission to paint Billy's nursery, I'd made sure the approval came through immediately. I'd been their silent guardian, protecting their home without them ever knowing it. And tonight, Jessica had told me I was just a burden they tolerated out of politeness. I got up and walked to my filing cabinet, pulling out the folder labeled Oakwood Gardens. 7 years of rental agreements, maintenance records, property tax payments. Thomas and Jessica's lease renewal from last month was right on top. They'd gotten another year at below-market rent, thanks to my instructions to keep increases minimal. The apartment they thought they'd found on their own, in the building they believed belonged to some faceless corporate landlord, was actually a gift from the father they'd just rejected. I thought about all the times over the years when I could have told them, when Jessica complained about their cheap landlord, who was too slow to fix things. When Thomas mentioned how lucky they were to live in a place they could actually afford. When they'd worried about rent increases, and I'd wanted to reassure them it would never be a problem. I'd kept quiet because I'd thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't want them to feel obligated to me. I didn't want my help to come with strings attached. I'd wanted Thomas to feel independent, successful on his own terms. But sitting here now, remembering Jessica's cruel words and Thomas's passive acceptance of them, I wondered if my silence had been a mistake. Maybe if they'd known the truth, tonight would have gone differently. Maybe Jessica would have thought twice before telling me I wasn't welcome in their home, the home I'd been paying for. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. The caller ID showed Morrison Property Management. "Mr. Henderson, this is Janet Morrison. I hope I'm not calling too late." "No, it's fine. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to let you know that we received a maintenance request today from apartment 4B. Apparently, there's a problem with the bathroom ceiling, some water damage that looks like it might be coming from the unit above. The tenant is requesting immediate attention." Apartment 4B, Thomas and Jessica's apartment. "What kind of water damage?" I asked. "From what I understand, there's some discoloration and the ceiling feels soft in one spot. Could be a slow leak that's been building up. We'll need to have someone take a look and possibly do some repairs." I closed my eyes. Of course this would happen now. "The tenant seemed quite insistent that this needed to be addressed immediately," Janet continued. "She mentioned something about having a young child in the home and being concerned about mold or structural damage." Jessica, demanding immediate attention from the landlord she had no idea was the same man she'd just humiliated and kicked out of her home. "Mr. Henderson, are you there?" "Yes, I'm here." "When did this request come in?" "About an hour ago. The tenant called our emergency line. I told her we'd have someone out first thing Monday morning, but she insisted it needed to be looked at sooner. She was quite vocal about her expectations." I could imagine. Jessica, in full demand mode, probably threatening to call the city or withhold rent if the problem wasn't fixed immediately. The same Jessica who'd told me I was disruptive and unwelcome. "What would you like me to do, Mr. Henderson? I can have our emergency contractor take a look tomorrow if you approve the overtime charges." I sat there in the silence of my kitchen, holding the phone, feeling the weight of irony pressing down on me. Jessica needed something from her landlord. She had no idea she was asking for help from the man she'd just told wasn't wanted in her life. For the first time since leaving their apartment, I felt something other than hurt and sadness. I felt a strange sense of power, of control over a situation that had left me feeling completely helpless just hours before. "Mr. Henderson, I'll call you back," I said finally. "Let me think about this." After hanging up, I sat back in my chair and stared at the property management letter. 7 years of being their anonymous benefactor. 7 years of making sure they had a safe, affordable place to live. And now they needed something from me without even knowing it. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I spent the weekend in a strange state of limbo, watching my phone and waiting for updates from Morrison Property Management. I'd told Janet to proceed with the emergency inspection, but to keep me informed of every development. What I discovered about Jessica's behavior toward her landlord was eye-opening, to say the least. Monday morning, Janet called me at 7:30. "Mr. Henderson, I need to fill you in on what happened over the weekend. Your tenant in 4B has been challenging. I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled into my kitchen chair. Tell me everything. Well, our contractor Mike went over Saturday morning as requested. The water damage is real. There's a slow leak from the apartment above that's been seeping down. It'll need some drywall repair and repainting, but it's not dangerous or urgent, like she claimed. But Jessica didn't accept that assessment, Janet sighed. That's putting it mildly. When Mike explained that we'd need to coordinate with the upstairs tenant to fix the source of the leak first, she completely lost it. Started yelling about how this was unacceptable, how she pays good money in rent and expects immediate results. I could picture it perfectly. Jessica, in her full entitled mode, probably standing there with her arms crossed, talking down to Mike like he was incompetent. She demanded to speak to the owner, Janet continued, said she wasn't going to deal with underlings, and wanted to talk to whoever was really in charge. I explained that the owner prefers to remain anonymous and handles all communication through our office. How did she take that? Not well, she said, and I quote, "I don't care what your precious owner prefers. This is my home and I have rights. If he wants to play mysterious landlord, he can deal with the consequences when I report this building to every housing authority in the city." The audacity was breathtaking. This was the same woman who'd thrown me out of her home just days before, telling me I was unwelcome and disruptive. Now she was making threats and demands to the very person who'd been subsidizing her comfortable life for years. "There's more," Janet said. She called again yesterday 3 times. The first call was to complain that Mike had tracked dirt through her hallway. The second was to demand that we provide temporary accommodations while any work is being done because she refuses to expose her child to construction dust. The third call was to inform us that she'd researched tenant rights and knows exactly what she's entitled to. I shook my head in amazement. What kind of temporary accommodations? A hotel suite. She specifically requested a suite at the Marriott downtown because anywhere else would be unsuitable for a family with a young child. When I explained that we don't typically provide hotel stays for non-emergency repairs, she told me that's exactly the kind of cheapskate attitude she'd expect from a landlord who won't even show his face. The irony was almost too much to bear. Jessica was calling me a cheapskate while living in an apartment I'd deliberately kept affordable for her family. She was demanding luxury accommodations from the same man she'd just told wasn't worthy of her son's company. She also wants compensation, Janet added, for the inconvenience, the potential health risks, and what she called mental distress from having to deal with incompetent property management. How much compensation? 2 months' rent. She said anything less would be insulting. I almost laughed. 2 months' rent on an apartment that I could have been charging market rate for would have been an extra $800 per month. Over 7 years, my gift to them had been worth thousands of dollars, and now Jessica wanted more money because she'd been slightly inconvenienced. "Mr. Henderson, I have to ask, do you want to just fix this quickly and move on? Some owners prefer to avoid the hassle even when tenants are being unreasonable." I thought about it. The old me, the father who'd spent 7 years trying to help his son from the shadows, would have probably just paid for the hotel and repairs to keep everyone happy. But something had changed since Christmas dinner. Something had shifted in how I saw my relationship with Thomas and Jessica. "Janet, I want you to document everything, every call, every demand, every threat, and I want you to handle this exactly by the book. No special accommodations, no extras that aren't required by law. Are you sure?" She's making quite a bit of noise about involving lawyers and housing authorities. Let her. Everything about this building is up to code and properly managed. If she wants to cause trouble, that's her choice. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table and really thought about what I was doing. For 7 years, I'd protected Thomas and Jessica from the realities of the rental market. I'd absorbed costs that other landlords would have passed on to tenants. I'd approved every request, fixed every problem, and kept their rent artificially low. And what had it gotten me? A daughter-in-law who saw me as a burden, and a son who wouldn't defend me when I was being humiliated. My phone rang again an hour later. Janet again. She called back. This time she wants to speak to our legal department about what she calls landlord harassment because we won't give her everything she's demanding. We don't have a legal department. I told her that. She said that just proves how fly-by-night this operation is, and that she's going to make sure everyone knows what kind of slumlord owns this building. Slumlord. The woman was calling me a slumlord while living in subsidized comfort in a building I maintain better than most landlords maintain their own homes. There's something else, Janet said. She mentioned that she's married to Thomas Henderson. Does that name mean anything to you? My stomach dropped. Why? She said her husband's father is some kind of deadbeat who's been bothering them. She said if the building owner is anything like the pathetic old man who keeps trying to insert himself into their family, then she knows exactly what kind of person she's dealing with. The words hit me like a physical blow. Jessica was using my relationship with Thomas as an example of the kind of person she expected her landlord to be. Pathetic, bothersome, someone to be avoided and dismissed. She had no idea she was talking about the same person. Mr. Henderson, are you there? I'm here, Janet. I want you to do something for me. The next time she calls with demands or threats, I want you to tell her that the owner has reviewed her file and is considering all options. What kind of options? I looked out my kitchen window at the gray December sky. Jessica wanted to play hardball with her mysterious landlord. She wanted to make threats and demands without consequences. She thought she could treat people badly and still get everything she wanted. Tell her the owner is evaluating whether this property continues to meet his investment goals. Tell her he's considering selling to a development company that's been making inquiries about the land. Is that true? It could be. There have been inquiries over the years. I've just never been interested in selling before. And now? I thought about Christmas dinner, about Jessica's cruel words, about Thomas's silence, about being told I was just a burden they tolerated out of politeness. Now I'm reconsidering a lot of things. After hanging up, I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out a folder I hadn't looked at in months. Inside were letters and emails from Meridian Development Group, a company that had been trying to buy my building for the past 2 years. They wanted to tear it down and build luxury condos. I'd turned them down repeatedly because I knew it would displace all my tenants, including Thomas and Jessica. I'd been protecting my son's family, even though they had no idea. But maybe it was time to stop protecting people who saw my care as weakness and my love as an obligation. I found the most recent letter from Meridian Development and read it again. Their offer had increased significantly since their first inquiry. Apparently, the location had become even more desirable. For the first time in 2 years, I was actually considering their proposal. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, but I recognized the tone immediately. This is Jessica Henderson, tenant in 4B at Oakwood Gardens. Your property manager is incompetent, and your building is falling apart. If you think you can ignore paying tenants and get away with it, you're wrong. I know my rights, and I'm not afraid to use them. Fix my ceiling immediately or deal with the consequences. I read the message twice, marveling at the irony. Jessica had gotten my personal phone number somehow and was now threatening me directly, not knowing that the negligent landlord she was texting was the same man she'd kicked out of her Christmas dinner. I typed back a simple response, "Your concerns have been noted. All options are being considered." Her reply came back immediately. "That's not good enough. I want action, not corporate double talk. My husband's deadbeat father is the kind of person who gives non-answers like that. If you're anything like him, this is going to be a problem." I stared at the text for a long moment. Jessica had just compared me to myself and found both versions wanting. The father she'd rejected and the landlord she was threatening were the same person, and she hated us both. Maybe it was time for George Henderson, the father, and George Henderson, the landlord, to finally meet. The call from Meridian Development came at the perfect time, just 3 days after Jessica's threatening text messages had started flooding my phone. I was sitting in my study, surrounded by property files and years of rental history, when the phone rang. "Mr. Henderson, this is David Meridian from Meridian Development Group. I hope you remember our previous conversations about your Oakwood Gardens property. I leaned back in my chair. I remember. Your company has been quite persistent. Well, sir, persistence pays off in this business. I'm calling because we've completed our latest market analysis, and I believe you'll find our new offer very compelling. The Oak Street corridor has become one of the most desirable development areas in the city. Over the past week, I'd been doing my own research. Property values in the neighborhood had skyrocketed. The small apartment building I'd bought 7 years ago as a steady investment had become a goldmine sitting on prime real estate. What kind of numbers are we talking about? I asked. $2.8 million, Mr. Henderson, cash offer, 30-day closing, and we handle all tenant relocations according to city ordinances. I nearly dropped the phone. $2.8 million. I'd paid $400,000 for the building in 2017. The appreciation was staggering. That's significantly higher than your previous offers. The market has changed dramatically. There's a huge demand for luxury condos in walkable neighborhoods, and your location is perfect. Tree-lined street, good schools, easy access to downtown. We could break ground within 6 months of closing. As David explained their development plans, my phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. I glanced at the screen while he talked. Still waiting for action on my ceiling. This is completely unacceptable. My husband says his father is the same way. All talk, no follow-through. Useless men who can't handle responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Jessica was comparing me unfavorably to myself, I was listening to an offer that would make both versions of me very wealthy. Mr. Henderson, are you still there? Sorry, David, you mentioned tenant relocations. What exactly does that involve? Standard 60-day notice as required by law. We provide relocation assistance, help finding comparable housing, moving cost reimbursement, things like that. Most tenants appreciate the support during the transition. 60 days. Thomas and Jessica would have 60 days to find a new place to live. After years of below-market rent and my silent protection, they'd be thrown into the real rental market, where a comparable apartment would cost them at least $800 more per month. How many units are currently occupied? According to our research, all 12 units are occupied with long-term tenants. That actually works in our favor. It shows the building is well managed and the location is desirable. Well managed. That was true, though Jessica certainly didn't seem to appreciate it. I need some time to think about this, David. Of course, but I should mention that this offer has an expiration date. The luxury condo market is hot right now, but these things can shift quickly. We'd need a decision within 2 weeks to keep this price point. After hanging up, I sat in my study and really considered what I was contemplating. Selling the building would displace not just Thomas and Jessica, but 10 other families who'd been good tenants over the years. Mrs. Patterson in 2A, who'd struggled financially a few years back. The young couple in 1C who'd just had their first baby. The retired teacher in 3B who lived on a fixed income. But then I thought about Jessica's text messages, her demands, her threats, her complete lack of gratitude for the stability I'd provided. I thought about Christmas dinner and being told I was unwelcome in the home I was literally paying for. My phone rang again. Janet from Morrison Property Management. Mr. Henderson, I'm sorry to bother you again, but your tenant in 4B has escalated her complaints. She's filed a report with the City Housing Department claiming the building is unsafe. On what grounds? The water damage in her ceiling? She's claiming we're ignoring a serious health hazard and that the building owner is negligent. An inspector is coming out tomorrow. I rubbed my temples. Janet, you know that building is up to code. We've had regular inspections. Of course it is. But she's also contacted a local news station about what she calls slum conditions and absentee landlords who exploit working families. The news station. Jessica was going to the media about her terrible landlord, the same man she'd humiliated at Christmas dinner, the same man who'd been subsidizing her family for 7 years. There's more, Janet continued. She's organized some of the other tenants to sign a complaint letter. She's telling them that the building owner is trying to force people out by ignoring maintenance issues. How many tenants signed? 3, from what I understand. Mrs. Patterson refused, and so did the couple in 1C. They said they've never had problems with management, but apartment 3A, 2C, and 4A signed on. Jessica was poisoning the well. turning my own tenants against me based on lies and exaggerations. She was destroying the peaceful community I'd tried to maintain, all because she didn't get her way immediately. What does she want now? Complete ceiling replacement, not just repair. Professional cleaning for potential mold exposure. 2 months of free rent for the inconvenience. And she wants a written apology from the building owner for what she calls negligent property management. A written apology from me for not giving her everything she demanded the moment she demanded it. Janet, I want you to prepare a letter for all tenants. What kind of letter? I looked out the window at the gray January sky, thinking about David Meridian's offer and Jessica's threats, and 7 years of trying to help a family that saw my efforts as worthless. A letter informing them that the building has been sold and will be demolished for redevelopment. 60 days notice as required by law. Silence on the other end of the phone. Mr. Henderson, are you sure about this? That's a pretty drastic response to one difficult tenant. It's not about one tenant, Janet. It's about recognizing when something isn't working anymore. What about the sale? Do you have a buyer? I will by tomorrow. Odd. After hanging up with Janet, I immediately called David Meridian back. David, it's George Henderson. I'm ready to accept your offer. Excellent. I have to say, I'm a bit surprised by the quick turnaround, but we're thrilled to move forward. I have one condition. I want the sale to close as quickly as possible. If you can do it in 30 days instead of 60, I'll take $50,000 off the price. Mr. Henderson, you just made my day. We can definitely make that happen. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of liberation and sadness. I was about to become nearly $3 million richer, but I was also about to lose my connection to Thomas and Jessica forever. Once they discovered that their despised landlord was actually the father they'd rejected, there would be no going back. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. Your silence says everything about what kind of landlord you are. When the news story airs tomorrow night, everyone will see how you treat families with children. You picked the wrong tenant to mess with. I typed back, the matter will be resolved within the week. Her response was immediate. It better be. My husband's father is just as useless as you are, but at least we got rid of him. You might not be so lucky. I read her message twice, then set my phone aside and opened my laptop. I had contracts to review and a new life to plan. Jessica had no idea what was coming, but she was right about one thing. The matter would definitely be resolved within the week. In 30 days, I'd be a millionaire, and Thomas and Jessica would be homeless. They'd finally understand exactly what they'd lost when they decided I wasn't worth having in their lives. The father they'd rejected and the landlord they'd threatened were about to have the last word. The eviction notices were delivered on a Tuesday morning in late January. I'd been awake since 5 a.m., unable to sleep, knowing that in just a few hours my son's world would come crashing down. Janet had assured me that all 12 notices would be delivered simultaneously to avoid confusion or panic spreading through the building before everyone was informed. I was sitting in my kitchen, nursing my third cup of coffee, when my phone rang at 8:15 a.m. Thomas's name appeared on the screen, and my heart started racing. Dad? His voice sounded shaky, confused. Dad, something terrible has happened. We got this notice saying our building is being sold, and we have to move out in 60 days. I don't understand how this could happen so suddenly. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. What kind of notice? It's from the property management company. They say the building has been sold to some development company that's going to tear it down. Dad, we can't afford to move. Do you know how expensive rent is now? We've been looking at places online this morning, and everything comparable is at least $800 more per month. $800 more. Exactly what I'd been saving them for 7 years. Jessica is freaking out, Thomas continued. She's talking about lawyers and tenant rights. But the notice looks official. We're supposed to be out by March 15th. What are we going to do? For a moment, I almost wavered. Hearing the genuine panic in my son's voice, the fear about his family's future, made me want to call David Meridian and cancel everything. But then I remembered Christmas dinner. I remembered Jessica's cruel words and Thomas's silence when I needed him to defend me. I'm sorry to hear that, son. That sounds very stressful. Dad, I know we haven't talked much lately, and I know things have been difficult, but I was wondering if maybe you could help us with a loan, just until we figure out what to do. A loan? My son, who'd watched his wife humiliate me and throw me out of their home, was now asking for money, not because he valued me or wanted me in his life, but because he was desperate. How much of a loan? Maybe $5,000. For a deposit on a new place and moving costs. I know it's a lot, but we're really stuck here. $5,000. Less than 2 months of the rent subsidy I'd been giving them without their knowledge. Less than I'd spent on building maintenance for their comfort over the years. I'll have to think about it, Thomas. Silence on the other end. Think about it? Dad, this is an emergency. We could end up homeless. I understand it's serious, but $5,000 is a lot of money for someone on a fixed income. Fixed income? Dad, what are you talking about? You own your house outright, and you've got your pension and savings. How little he knew about my life. How little he'd ever bothered to ask. I'll let you know what I can do, I said finally. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen feeling hollowed out. Thomas had called me for the first time in weeks, and it was only because he needed money. Not to apologize for Christmas dinner, not to check on how I was doing, just to ask for cash to solve his problems. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Jessica's number. George, this is Jessica. I think we need to talk. Her voice was different now. Gone was the cold authority from Christmas dinner. She sounded worried, almost pleading. What can I do for you, Jessica? I'm sure Thomas told you about our situation with the apartment. We got an eviction notice this morning and we're really struggling to figure out our next steps. I almost laughed at the irony. The woman who'd thrown me out of her home was now calling me for help. That does sound challenging. Look, George, I know things have been tense between us. Maybe I was too harsh at Christmas. Family dynamics can be complicated. And maybe I overreacted. Maybe she overreacted. That was as close to an apology as I was likely to get from Jessica. I appreciate you saying that. The thing is, we really need help right now. Thomas mentioned asking you for a loan, but I was thinking maybe you could do more than that. Maybe you could co-sign for a new apartment. With your credit and income, it would make getting approved much easier. Co-sign. She wanted me to put my financial reputation on the line for her family's housing, just weeks after telling me I was unwelcome in their lives. That's a big responsibility, Jessica. I know it is. But we're family, right? And Billy is your grandson. You wouldn't want him to be homeless. She was using Billy now, leveraging my love for my grandson to get what she needed. The same child she'd shielded from me at Christmas dinner was now being offered as emotional blackmail. Let me ask you something, Jessica. This landlord of yours, the one you've been having problems with, what do you think of him? Her tone immediately hardened. He's a nightmare. Completely unresponsive, negligent, probably some rich jerk who doesn't care about his tenants. I tried everything to get him to fix our ceiling properly, and he just ignored me. That's exactly the kind of person I can't stand. Someone who has power, but won't use it responsibly. I see. Why do you ask? Just curious. It sounds like you really don't respect him. Respect him? George, this man let our ceiling rot for weeks. He ignored my calls, dismissed my concerns about Billy's health, and basically told me to deal with it. He's exactly the kind of deadbeat landlord who gives property owners a bad name. I sat there listening to her describe me, the real me, the landlord me, with complete contempt. She had no idea she was talking about the same person she was now, begging for help. What would you say if you found out this landlord was someone you knew? What do you mean? Hypothetically. What if the person you've been fighting with turned out to be someone in your life? Jessica laughed bitterly. That would be just my luck. Probably some old guy like someone who thinks he knows better than everyone else but actually doesn't know anything about real responsibility. Like me. She was describing me perfectly without realizing it. Jessica, I need to tell you something. What? I took a deep breath. 7 years of secrets were about to come spilling out. I own your building. I've owned it for 7 years. I'm the landlord you've been fighting with. Complete silence on the other end of the phone. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't say a word for almost 30 seconds. What did you just say? Oakwood Gardens, 1247 Oak Street, apartment 4B. I bought the building in 2017, right before you and Thomas moved in. I've been your landlord this entire time. That's impossible. I can send you copies of the deed, the property tax records, whatever you need to see. But the property management company, Morrison Property Management, handles the day-to-day operations. I hired them to maintain anonymity. Every decision about your apartment, every repair, every rent renewal, that was all me. I could hear her breathing getting faster, more shallow. The ceiling repair you've been demanding, the maintenance requests, all those angry messages and threats you've been sending, you were sending them to me. Oh my God. The rent you've been paying, $1,200 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment in that neighborhood, that's about $800 below market rate. I kept it low, deliberately. I don't understand. I wanted Thomas to feel independent. I wanted you both to have a stable home without feeling like you owed me anything. So I bought the building and made sure you'd never have to worry about housing costs or bad landlords. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. You've been our landlord for 7 years. 7 years of below-market rent. 7 years of immediate repairs and maintenance. 7 years of making sure you felt secure and comfortable, all while you thought I was just a burden you had to tolerate. But the eviction notice, I sold the building, Jessica. I accepted an offer from Meridian Development yesterday. The sale closes in 30 days. Why would you do that? For the first time in our conversation, anger crept into my voice. Because I got tired of being treated like garbage by people I was trying to help. I got tired of being told I was unwelcome in a home I was paying for. George, you can't do this. We have nowhere to go. You have 60 days to figure it out. That's more notice than you gave me when you threw me out at Christmas. This is crazy. You can't destroy our lives because of one argument. One argument? Jessica, you told me I was a burden. You said you only invited me out of politeness. You kicked me out of your home and told me I didn't understand boundaries. And then, not knowing who I was, you spent weeks insulting me as your landlord, calling me negligent and irresponsible. I didn't know. That's exactly the point. You didn't know who you were talking to, so you showed me exactly what you really think of me. Both versions of me. Silence stretched between us. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was shaking. What do you want? Money? An apology? What will it take for you to stop this? It's too late, Jessica. The contracts are signed. Meridian Development owns the building now. There has to be something. There was something. It was called being treated with basic respect in my grandson's home. It was called having a son who would defend me when his wife decided to humiliate me. But that ship has sailed. George, please think about Billy. I did think about Billy. For 7 years, I thought about giving him a stable home with parents who wouldn't have to stress about rent. But apparently that wasn't enough. We can fix this. We can work things out. Like we worked things out at Christmas dinner, Jessica started crying. Real tears, not the manipulative kind she'd used before. I'm sorry, George. I'm so sorry about Christmas. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. Yes, you were, but sorry doesn't change anything now. What about Thomas? He's your son. Thomas made his choice when he sat there and watched you throw me out. He could have stood up for me. He chose not to. He loves you? No, Jessica. Thomas needs me now. That's different than love. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were shaking, but I felt oddly calm. The truth was finally out there. The 7-year charade was over. Now, we'd all have to live with the consequences. 6 months after the sale of Oakwood Gardens closed, I was sitting on the deck of my new house overlooking Lake Martin, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. The silence was profound. No traffic, no city noise, just the gentle lapping of waves against the dock and the occasional call of a loon. I'd bought the lake house with cash. 2 weeks after Meridian Development wired the money to my account. $2.75 million after all expenses. More money than I'd ever imagined having, earned from a building I'd bought to help my son. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thomas had called me exactly once since the eviction. It was 3 days before they had to move out, and his voice was desperate, pleading. Dad, please, there has to be something you can do. Can't you buy the building back? Can't you stop this somehow? I'd been packing boxes in my old house, preparing for my own move, when he called. "It's done, Thomas. The sale is final. But we're family. We're your family. How can you do this to us? I didn't do anything to you. I spent 7 years trying to help you, and you never even knew it. I'm not the one who decided we weren't family. That's not fair." "Fair?" I'd almost laughed. "Son, I subsidized your rent for 7 years. I made sure you had a safe, affordable place to live. I took care of problems before you even knew they existed. And when your wife decided I was unwelcome in your home, you said nothing. I should have stood up for you at Christmas. I know that now." "Yes, you should have, but you didn't. So you're just going to abandon us? Abandon Billy?" That question had hurt more than I wanted to admit. Billy was innocent in all of this. He didn't choose his parents' behavior or deserve to suffer for it. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just not rescuing you anymore." The call had ended badly, with Thomas accusing me of being cruel and vindictive. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was being cruel, but I was also being honest for the first time in years. They'd found a new apartment eventually, but not without struggle. According to the brief updates I'd gotten from neighbors, they'd had to move in with Jessica's sister for 2 months while they saved up enough for a deposit. The new place was smaller, further from Thomas's job, and cost exactly $850 more per month than their old rent. Welcome to the real world. Jessica had tried reaching out twice in the months since, once through email, once through a letter sent to my old address and forwarded by the post office. Both messages were apologies mixed with requests for help. She was sorry for how she treated me. She understood now how much I'd done for them. Could we please work something out? I deleted the email without responding. The letter went into my fireplace. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. My new life at the lake was quieter than I'd expected. I'd worried that the isolation might lead to depression or regret, but instead, I found myself more at peace than I'd been in years. I joined a fishing club where nobody knew my history. I'd started volunteering at a literacy program where my only identity was George, the retired guy who's good with kids. I missed Billy terribly. That was the hardest part of all this. But I'd learned something important. You can't love someone through their parents if those parents don't want you around. My grandson would grow up without knowing me, and that was Thomas and Jessica's choice to live with. On this particular morning, I was reading the local newspaper when my phone rang. Unknown number, which usually meant a spam call, but something made me answer. "Mr. Henderson, this is David Meridian from Meridian Development." "David, I wasn't expecting to hear from you again." "Well, sir, I have some interesting news. The Oakwood Gardens project has been completed, and we're having a grand opening celebration next weekend. I wanted to invite you to see what we built with your property." I looked out at the lake, considering. "What did you build?" "Luxury condos, as planned. But we also incorporated some community spaces, a small park, a children's playground, community garden plots. The city was very pleased with our design." "That sounds nice. The thing is, Mr. Henderson, your old tenants, some of them have been asking about you, particularly Mrs. Patterson from 2A. She wanted me to pass along her thanks for all the years you kept her rent affordable. Apparently, she figured out who you were after the sale." Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who'd struggled with rent payments a few years back. I'd quietly instructed Morrison to work with her, never increasing her rent, despite rising property values. How was she doing? That's actually why I'm calling. She found a nice senior living community, and she's doing well. But she mentioned that you'd been a kind landlord, and it got me thinking. We have several properties in our portfolio, and we're always looking for investors who understand the human side of real estate. I'm not sure I'm interested in getting back into property management. Not management, investment partnership. Silent partner, like you were before, but with a company that shares your values about treating tenants fairly. I was quiet for a moment, thinking about it. I had more money now than I'd ever need, and the lake house was beautiful. But the days were long sometimes. What kind of properties? Senior housing, mainly. Affordable apartments for people on fixed incomes. There's a real need for landlords who see tenants as people, not just income sources. After hanging up with David, I sat on my deck for a long time, watching the water. I thought about Mrs. Patterson and the other tenants who'd been good people caught in the crossfire of my family drama. Maybe there was a way to help people like them without getting emotionally involved. Maybe I could use what I'd learned from 7 years of silent generosity, but do it with boundaries this time. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Thomas or even Billy somehow. But it was from Janet at Morrison Property Management. Mr. Henderson, I hope you're doing well. I wanted you to know that I've started my own property management company, focusing on ethical landlords and fair tenant treatment. If you ever decide to invest in real estate again, I'd love to work with you. You were the best owner I ever worked with. I smiled, typing back, "Congratulations on the new business. I might have some opportunities to discuss soon." As the sun climbed higher over the lake, I made myself a second cup of coffee and opened my laptop. Maybe it was time to start a new chapter. Not as the father desperately trying to help an ungrateful family, but as a man who'd learned that generosity without respect is just enabling. I could help people again, but this time I'd help people who valued help when they received it. Thomas and Jessica had taught me an important lesson. You can't force people to appreciate you, but you can choose to spend your energy on people who do. My phone rang one more time. This time, the caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local to my old neighborhood. "Mr. Henderson, this is Linda Patterson, Martha Patterson's daughter. From apartment 2A? Linda, yes. How's your mother doing?" "She's doing wonderful, actually, but she's been talking about you constantly since she moved to Sunset Manor. She figured out that you were the landlord who helped her when she was struggling, and she wanted me to find you. She doesn't need to thank me. Actually, she does. Mr. Henderson, my mother lived in fear of eviction for 3 years after my father died. She never told me how bad things were financially, but you kept her housing stable during the worst period of her life. She wants to see you." I looked out at the peaceful lake, thinking about choices and consequences and the difference between family you're born with and family you choose. "I'd like that," I said finally. "I'd like that very much." Maybe healing didn't always mean reconciling with the people who hurt you. Maybe sometimes it meant finding new people to care about, people who understood the value of kindness. 6 months ago, I'd been the unwanted father and the unappreciated landlord. Today, I was just George, a man with resources and time and a clearer understanding of where to invest both. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was freedom.